Hello everyone, and apologies for the headset on my head, which is going to make this even more interesting, but we had some technical difficulties. But we're here and we're in our final week, which is awesome, of the Humanising Work Live Series. Yeah, woo. It's felt like a long journey. We started with the humanising the world of work and what does it mean, what is human leadership and emotional intelligence. We went through, a number of different topics around strengths and key motivators and team cohesion and clarity and all of these amazing, wonderful topics that we've covered. And I'm really looking forward to this one with you, Hugo. So thank you for joining. This is really, really good to have you with us. And we're going to be talking about things that motivate teams, but beyond just kind of the traditional sense of motivators. We're going to be talking on values and beliefs and really getting into some really interesting topics and sharing some of your expertise. So thanks for joining.
No, thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to having a conversation. I'm going to pretend that we're not being live streamed. So
yeah, it's always a weird one, isn't it? Because we have such great conversations, and this is what the purpose of doing these, to capture some of the conversations that we naturally would be having with clients and with each other. So yeah, just thank you for joining us. And let's kick off then. Let's kick off with the first question that we've got, and that's kind of so why is meaning such a strong motivator, and specifically for teams? Because we've touched, I think, a lot on meaning for individuals, but for teams, why is that such a strong intrinsic motivator?
I think so for me, I still see being part of a team as a collection of individuals. So we all come together to form part of a team. So a team is still made up of people and individuals. So and I think in our hearts, I think we all want to feel like what we do matters. And we want to make a positive difference in someone's life. So whether that's as a parent, whether that's as a friend, whether that's as a colleague. So let me give you a personal example. So I left my corporate life for many reasons, but one of them was in search of meaning. So that old chestnut. And I kind of actually went from one extreme to another. So I left my corporate career and decided to go and work for a charity. It was a massive global charity, and I can honestly say I have never met a more amazing, motivated, wonderful group of people in my life. And it was a real honor and privilege actually to work with them and be a part of that team. And actually just being a part of that team, I felt motivated going into work every single day. I still haven't experienced anything else like it. And I think it was because we were all united behind this common purpose and this very, very worthy cause. But when I left, it was a fixed term contract, and when I left, it actually made me realise that as amazing as it is to kind of save the world, and as noble as that is, you don't have to save the world in order to find meaning and purpose in what you do. And I think that we can all kind of achieve meaning or purpose in our day-to-day lives. And I think it's just a kind of matter of perspective and connecting the kind of what we do with the why we do what we do. And I think that in turn is what creates that internal, like kind of intrinsic motivation. And if you can create that kind of common purpose as a team, particularly, and unite behind that common purpose as a team, then that is, I think, what really drives that team motivation in a far greater way than individual motivation or individual motivators. And of course we will all have our individual motivations as well, but as a team, if you can unite behind a common goal, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and it's so powerful hearing your own story as well, and also connecting. I find what people are struggling with is that how do we connect it? How do we get in a room and talk about it? And what questions are going to help us to create that environment where people can openly share their different views and perspectives and values and everything, to then go, well, hang on a minute, there's some common themes. We're not all going to have the same purpose and reason for coming to work. And actually, it might be everything from saving the world to actually, I just want to earn some money and work 9 till 5. And all of those are okay. But there's probably some common themes that you can find if you open the conversation. It's how you do it that people seem to be really struggling with. Have you found any particular ways or tips or tricks or things that you're doing with leadership teams at the moment, or just generically, have you found any ways that work?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think for me, it's really just coming back to really trying to sort of break down and understand the why behind what you're doing. So there's a lot of research that Amy Wrzesniewski did, so she's a professor of organizational behavior, who found through her research that people tend to have kind of 3 different orientations towards work. And there's a job orientation, which is kind of like people view their work as a means to an end. Career orientation, so people are driven and motivated by that progression and climbing that career ladder. And then calling orientation, so people that view their career as the form of purpose and personal fulfillment. So that's their motivation. And people are actually generally evenly split across all 3, but people who fall into that calling orientation tend to report higher life satisfaction, well-being, motivation. But even in the other areas, so even if you view your job as a means to an end, so someone might find that actually they work for I don't know, a fast food restaurant, for argument's sake, and so for them it's just about a paycheck. But what is that? So for me, it's really about understanding, but why is that paycheck important? So what is that paycheck providing you or paying for? That is the reason why you're there. Now, it could be that it's to put food on the table for your family, for your child. So there is always going to be some intrinsic reason for why you're doing what you're doing. So even if it's not in that specific job itself, there's still a motivation as to why you're doing it.
Yeah, interesting way of bringing that back to what you're doing every day. I think that's also the thing, isn't it? Even when you're looking at it that way. So if I do this and, I get to the end of the month and I've got my paycheck, and then that's going to enable me to buy a house or, do whatever, that's really great. But then there's also the other way. So you've then got to go, well, actually, so every time I speak to a new client or every time I fill out that spreadsheet, which I find really monotonous, how does that link to my greater meaning and purpose? That's the difficult part, isn't it?
Yeah. But then that again is then, I think, understanding what is the purpose of your organization. So that's where I think company vision, company mission, company values, your company purpose, I guess, really come into the spotlight. And also then your team. So what's the purpose of your team? What's the purpose of what you do? So, okay, you might be filling in a spreadsheet, but what's the reason for filling in that spreadsheet? What does that actually enable someone else in the organization to do or to achieve? And how does that contribute to that kind of greater goal? Because ultimately, when you're in an organization or in a team, these roles are created for a purpose. So nobody hires you.
It's such a good point.
The money at the end of the month or the week. It's because actually what you do is really important in some shape or form, right? So you've just got to kind of unlock what's the importance of what you do.
I really like that, and I've never really thought about it in that way, and it does kind of lead into that question that I've just put on the screen there, which is kind of who plays the most significant role in helping you find that link, and also then driving that motivation, meaning into those maybe tasks that you haven't done that link to. You know, your role does have a purpose, otherwise you're right, it might not be there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it wouldn't be there, you know, because, you know, no organisation can afford to pay people for for the hell of it. So yeah, it is there, and I think in answer to whose responsibility is or who plays the most significant role, of course, you know, yes, we as the individual, you know, need to kind of take that personal leadership in really trying to find the why. So I call it kind of my why. So what's my why? Why am I doing what I'm doing? But, you know, that's not to say that, you know, you might not have the answers, or you might not necessarily know. So, you know, you might not know actually why that spreadsheet is really important because you haven't been told. So, you know, it's then about actually asking, you know, your peers, your colleagues, your line manager. Communication then becomes really important. And actually I think by having that conversation, you know, and just being really open and honest, and you know, maybe trying to make it a team event, you know, so why not have that conversation at the start of a team meeting? You know, to kind of really energize and motivate the whole team, and kind of go, right guys, what's the purpose of what we do as a team? You know, and kind of unite people behind a common kind of team goal. And you know, for people who don't know what that is, you know, help them understand what it is and why what they do is really important. I think the more we can help people connect with why what they do is important, the more motivated they'll feel and empowered they'll feel to want to do it. You ultimately want people to want to do their job. Right?
It's about not getting the best from your employees. It's about getting them to want to give to the organization and to the purpose. I love that. And what I've loved about that is you've touched on two things in answer to the question, which was who plays the most significant role. Well, you do, because if you don't feel like you're deeply connected or have a purpose, or bring it up, and also have a conversation as a team. What do you say to people who are maybe a little bit nervous about having those types of conversations within their team or with their manager? How can they find purpose?
I think, you know, I mean, small steps, I guess, you know, so if you feel uncomfortable perhaps talking to your boss, you know, then perhaps try talking to a colleague, you know, or a peer, you know, and maybe try, or you know, someone who does a similar role to yourself. And maybe try and have that two-way conversation as a one-to-one, and just sort of say, you know, I'm kind of really struggling to understand what the purpose of my role is, you know, how do you feel, you know, and maybe get their perspective on it. You know, they might have been there longer, maybe seek out someone who has been there longer, and just try and get different perspectives if you're struggling to find, you know, your own voice, I guess. But I think it's important to open up the conversation with whoever you feel comfortable having that conversation with.
And connecting. I like the idea of connecting with someone that it might not be the same role, but it's a similar type of role. You know, maybe it's something that they can just, as a leader, you need to be able to connect different people with different people within the organization. So I guess there is that level of emotional intelligence to look up and go, okay, well, this person, like, I might not even be able to help them. And maybe even the message won't land from me as a leader because we work so closely together. So maybe it's going to be more effective to connect with others. I like that. There's a comment here around surface values and kind of really getting under the surface of what it means and why. And I guess exploring purpose and meaning in a workplace context. I kind of wanted to come to the second question, which is around how values and beliefs do influence our differences in meaning. A lot of the clients that we're working with at the moment are kind of cross-cultural as well. Teams are becoming a little bit more dispersed because recruitment is enabling people to hire from maybe different areas, and obviously diversity is increasing, which is obviously a really positive thing. So it's, how do values and our beliefs influence these kind of conversations?
Yeah, Well, greatly.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think, again, it's one of those things that unless you're really aware of it, you probably, it all happens kind of subconsciously. So again, I think bringing awareness to our values and really understanding your values and your beliefs, both in terms of whether they're helping or hindering you, is really important. So both our values and our beliefs are formed really early on from our childhood, which is part of every experience that we're exposed to and continues on right the way through into our adult lives. Every single experience that we have, both positive and negative, actually just then starts to reinforce our often quite tightly held beliefs and values that we've been brought up with. And I think if they serve us well, they can be a really positive motivator. But conversely, I think if they are hindering us, they can really limit our potential and motivation, obviously, as a result. So, for example, I really value connection through both belonging, a sense of belonging, and also relationships. That's both in my personal life as well as my professional life. And I have an inherent belief that people are good intentioned, right? But that has left me exposed at times, and I have been burnt on more than one occasion, both personally and professionally, which has then set me back in trusting people. But because my underlying beliefs are so strong, and it's a really tightly held belief that people are inherently good and have good intentions, I can't hold grudges for very long at all. Even if I want to, I can't. So I'm very quick to kind of forgive and forgive people and move on. That said, doesn't mean that they stay in my life. So I will remove negative people from my life, but it doesn't mean that I will hold on to a grudge. I'll forgive, I'll move on. And what that means for me is that I won't judge the next person based on somebody else's behavior, which for me is really positive, because it has meant that I have been able to cultivate and nurture some really important, powerful, positive relationships in both my professional career and in my personal career, which are a source of inspiration, motivation, everything for me. But you can imagine that if I had the opposite belief, that people are actually untrustworthy and ill-intentioned, you can imagine how that would play out, because even when I would have positive experiences, I would meet each and every one of them with suspicion. And so that would really hinder my ability to be able to forge positive relationships, which is a really important part of motivation. And for a lot of people, because inherently we are, as we've found out this year, we are a social being. We like human connection.
Yeah, and you've touched on a really important, and thank you for sharing as well, and it's this human element. We all have experiences. We talked a lot on the unique contribution. So if you haven't seen that, go back and watch that. It's about what you bring to the table: skills, strengths, knowledge, experiences, personal and professional. Not only that, but your family and people around you and your friends, your social circles, experiences and perceptions, and it's the organization and the team's responsibility. Notice I haven't said the leader's responsibility. It's almost all of our responsibility to dig a little bit deeper into these types of experiences. Why do you feel that way? Or you've acted in that way. That's interesting. I wonder why. So it's really going into that deep understanding of the human. And I guess when we're talking about motivations for a team, actually that deeper sense of human connection will enable us to feel psychologically safe and do all of those things. But it starts with understanding that belief system. Yeah, and that behavior a little bit more. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, it is. And then, and it is hard, because like I said, a lot of this unless you're, I mean, we know because we kind of study psychology and we're kind of immersed in this probably more on a daily basis. But for the average person, and if I think of myself before studying psychology, it was all just subconscious. You kind of go through life just doing what you're doing without really paying much attention to why you're doing what you're doing, or why you think a certain way, or why you believe something, or why something's important to you. I find the whole thing fascinating, but so I think it's really important to first of all understand some of those things. Particularly, I think we tend to challenge ourselves to understand things more often when things aren't going well. So when things are going great, we happily carry on, but when things start going maybe a little bit awry in our lives, that's probably when we start having a bit of a deeper look into ourselves. But then I think it's about really understanding what tools are out there to enable you to really sort of start challenging some of those limiting beliefs. So CBT, ACTS, there's a number of different models and theories out there that really just help you kind of break down and challenge that potentially limiting or negative belief that you have. And that is actually really hard work.
And can take years, right, of self-reflection and understanding. There's a question in my mind, and I'm going, well, I'm hearing a lot about burnout, and I'm hearing a lot about I don't have time to make a cup of tea in the day, never mind to we've got Zoom fatigue where it's back to back meetings, and if you've taken half an hour out of your day to listen to this, hopefully there's something there for you to take away from it. So the question for me is, how do we do this? That could take years, and it is a deep conversation first with yourself to go, actually, what beliefs do I have, for one? Then to go, well, I need to maybe think about them, and why is that? Oh, and that's the reason. Like, that takes a lot of time. How are we making sure that people have time to do this stuff?
Yeah, and it does take a lot of kind of self-reflection, I guess, and time, and yes, so I think you will have to invest some time. So ultimately it's not if it's just going to be left in the subconscious, then it's never going to come into your conscious awareness. So you will need to invest some time in kind of really sort of understanding some of your thoughts. I think writing things down is always a good way. If something comes to mind, you can always reflect on it later if you don't have time to do it at the time. But there are different types of strategies as well. So there are things that take a lot longer, in terms of really kind of breaking down some of those thought processes. And then there's some really quick reframing type of strategies that you can learn that can really help you with more kind of real time resilience, as I call it. So I think it doesn't all have to take decades to learn. Some of these things are quite quick as well as powerful.
What I'm hearing is just take the small step, and try and build it in as you go. It's kind of, maybe that's the best way of doing this. It's not something that you set aside 3 days to go and find yourself. You reflect, why did I behave in that way? It's a daily thing. It's a situational thing to just be a little bit more self-aware in the moment. Exactly.
Just be aware, and just kind of a simple thing is just to really think about if it's something that bothered you, why did I behave that way? Why did I snap at my colleague, for example? If that's something that bothered you, you were a bit short with your colleague, really to sort of just take a moment to just kind of go, why did I do that? Okay, what was going through my head? What was the thought process? Where did that belief come from? Is it a genuine belief? So that's where you can then kind of start to sort of break it down into trying to understand where some of those limiting beliefs are. Is it because actually I feel like all people are bad? Okay, are all people really bad? What's the evidence for that? So, it's kind of, it sounds quite clinical, because it is about really just sort of challenging your thought process. And sometimes, because when we're in the heat of the moment, we're not thinking rationally. We're caught up in emotion, because someone's upset us or said something that's, angered us, and we've responded or reacted in a certain way. And when you diffuse the situation and you think about it rationally and start challenging some of those thought processes more rationally, when you've taken the heat out of it, that's when you can really start kind of breaking down some of those barriers.
Yeah, and I'm kind of, as a colleague as well, if you're the person that's been snapped at, like you said, take the heat out of it. Maybe it's a couple of days later or something, but do help that person then reflect if you've got the trust with that person, right? So again, we're coming back to, if you have that deep-rooted sense of human connection together. Hey, Anne, I noticed like things weren't right the other day. Did you realize? Yeah, I did, but actually, what was it? And that doesn't need to be an hour-long conversation, does it?
No. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the first place, especially when it comes to in the workplace. If you have that kind of, deep-rooted kind of sense of, camaraderie and team purpose, and, where you all feel like you're in it together, and you're working towards the same goal, it can, and that creating that sense of kind of belonging, and this is where things like, inclusion and psychological safety, all of these things kind of come into the fore for creating that sort of environment. But, that's when it becomes, it's so much easier to have that conversation where you can just literally just pick up the phone or, make a call and say, look, that didn't go very well. Here's why I think it didn't go well from my perspective. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and again, if you're connected, so coming right back and circling back to your final, like your first point, which was around meaning and joint meaning as a team. And we're getting this question a lot: how do I keep my team motivated, especially through times of change and when everyone's already burnt out? How do we connect? Well, when you do connect around purpose and meaning, you create that sense of trust. And actually, the reason that I'm then communicating with you in the way that I am is because we share that common goal, that place that we want to get to together. And if you help me and I help you to understand these beliefs and values and experiences and everything that you're bringing to the table, we get there quicker, or at least easier. Or maybe it's just having more fun along the way. It just feels better.
Who doesn't want to feel like they're part of something? Right, so that kind of comes back to that whole meaning thing, but meaning feels so much better when you feel like you're in it together. So, it's and it brings in all the other elements of kind of well-being as well, and like relationships and positive emotions, and so you kind of, that for me, I think is, and going back to my experience of working with the charity, I mean, that feeling of being in it together is, I think, hands down one of the most powerful team motivators there is. Yeah, and not everyone can up and leave and work for a charity, but that's not what we're saying here, is it? What we're saying is find that meaning and purpose in your everyday, and use each other as a team to connect those dots, because you're in it together. You might as well support each other along the way. 28 minutes has absolutely flown. I know. I'm not even sure if we managed to cover everything we were meant to cover.
I know. No, we haven't, because we've got psycap to talk about, and so maybe we're going to have another session. we'll have to have. Oh dear, but it's been amazing speaking to you, and thank you.
Thank you.
There's a few more comments around really good meditation for frustration and thought processes that you could tap into. So please, if you're listening to this, keep putting comments on and sharing some content with people that might be useful. But thank you, that's been incredibly valuable conversation.
Thank you for having me. I cannot believe how quickly that's gone.
It's flown, hasn't it? Same time tomorrow, actually. So we've got a few more sessions until Friday. Friday will be the last one. So
oh no.
That's going to be, and I'm sure we'll do more following that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been fantastic. So tune in if you haven't already to the previous ones. Tune in again to tomorrow's. And yeah, thank you, Huma. Just really appreciate your time on that one.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoyed.
Thanks, everyone.